Hi everyone, welcome to our REGSTALKs podcast series. We're going to call it Regulatory in Practice podcast series. So at REGSTALK, we are here to simplify medical device regulations through practical conversations, not just lectures, but also real discussions with actually looking into how it's working on an everyday basis. So, in this podcast series, there's something unique, which is we are intentionally speaking with young aspiring professionals and learning and how they're doing their job. So, what challenges they're facing and how they think through decisions and what actually works in practice. So, we are actually spotlighting the early and mid career professionals in the regulatory industry to come to us, join with us, and discuss on various different topics. So, at RegStalk, we always take this one topic at a time very seriously. So today we are going to discuss only about the US FDA's pre-submission topic. And we also have an amazing guest with us today. So thank you so much for joining with us, Akash. I have like a beautiful introduction for you. So Akash Kirani, he is a biomedical engineer with a master's degree in regulatory affairs from Northeastern University, specializing in medical devices. So Akash currently serves as quality and regulatory specialist at Milio Labs, California, where he plays a key role in regulatory strategy and quality management. So in his experience, he has authored multiple 510K submissions. He's also participated in nearly 5 FDA pre-submissions, which is our topic today, actively engaging with the agency and also evaluating a detailed feedback to shape the regulatory pathways for product development. Beyond his professional responsibilities, he has also developed a regulatory intelligence platform. So it's called Global Medrex. It's a centralized regulatory database covering requirements across 100 plus countries, which is it is created to simplify and streamline global regulatory research. I have personally used this platform. It's an amazing platform. We will drop a link here. You can always go visit the platform. So, with a strong passion for healthcare, medical technology, Akash is deeply committed towards advancing QARA excellence in the medical device industry. So, we are very, very proud and happy to have Akash Kirani here with us today. How do you feel joining with us, Akash?
Thank you so much, Niveda and the REGSTALK team for having me on this podcast. Today, I'll be sharing my experience with the FDA pre-submission program, which is commonly referred as pre-sub, which is a part of Q submission process and how it plays a critical role in building a regulatory strategy for the product development.
Great. Thank you so much, Akash. So, we're all set with the topic with our guest here with us today. So, I'm going to start it very simply. And also, very importantly, this podcast is going to be very, very crisp. We have got like 5 questions, like very pressing questions to ask to our guest today. So, the first question here is, let's start simple. Why should a company even consider a FDA pre submission before they're filing their first submission or even before their resubmission? What do you think about it, Akash?
That's a great question, Niveda, and thank you so much for bringing that up. Firstly, it's important to understand that the pre-submission program is voluntary and it's not mandatory thing. But strategically, it's very extremely valuable for a medical device manufacturers, and companies should consider a pre-sub in order to understand this FDA's expectations early during their design and development stage or the feasibility stage. And it also helps in confirming the regulatory pathways such as 510K, PMA, or the de novo. And sometimes it also helps in validating the predicate selection for 510K application. And it also helps in clarifying the testing requirements and aligning on the clinical and study designs for the in vitro diagnostic devices as well. Let me give you an example. Suppose if a company skips the pre-submission and directly submits the 510K or any other applications, the FDA may respond saying that additional bench testing might be required, or the predicate or device is not appropriate, or sometimes they also say that the clinical sample size is insufficient. For example, they might be expecting more number than the proposed ones. At this time, the company has to redo all the studies, which means definitely it will increase the cost and significant delay occurs. So engaging early with the FDA will definitely reduce the uncertainty and strengthening the submission's quality. The best time to initiate the pre-sub based on my experience is it is during the feasibility and the early development stage, and definitely not after the validation testings. Because at this stage, the company can still adapt the strategy based on this FDA's feedback.
Okay, thank you so much for giving like
Yeah,
an amazing outline to start with. So I'm really impressed that
yeah,
the precept is actually helping us with finding out our predicate devices and also help set that platform with our authorities or
yeah,
whoever's assessing our application. And thank you also for bringing up the timeline. So you should definitely do it during the feasibility and definitely not at the
yeah,
end of your product development life cycle. So yeah, that's something that we were looking forward to. So with that, I'm just going to go to our next question, a second question.
yeah.
What would you say are the key advantages or maybe some limitations of pre-submission programs? So we always discuss about advantages. So in other words, I would like to put it like, when should you consider to do a pre-sub versus when to avoid it?
Got it. Well, there are both advantages and limitations for the pre-submission program, and it totally depends on the stage where the company is right now. And some of the advantages include it's a free of cost, and FDA doesn't charge for any of the pre-submission programs. And it definitely allows early communications with the FDA and develop strong relationship with the reviewers. And it helps to build a strong regulatory strategy throughout the product development for medical device manufacturers, and sometimes it also confirms whether the predicate device is appropriate or not. And in addition, FDA may also provide some insights on applicable standards and the guidance documents that are applicable to our product, so which helps to develop the regulatory strategy for our team. And however, there are some limitations as well. Firstly, it's a non-binding thing. So it means that FDA feedback provides the FDA which provides the feedback during a pre-submission is not legally binding during the final submission. So while it definitely helps in guiding the strategy, and the final team may raise additional questions during the actual review. And the other limitations which I think about is the timeline is typically 60 to 70 days for receiving the written feedback, and sometimes it might also delay due to the external factors. And finally, sometimes FDA may recommend that submitting an additional pre-sub if the information is not sufficient for them to understand and provide the feedback. So yes, it might slightly delay the submission timeline, but in most cases, the delay is much smaller when compared to addressing those deficiencies in the later stages. I can
Yeah,
definitely
that's
give you an example based on my experience. And for instance, if manufacturer is seeking a FDA's feedback on proposed predicate device, so the response can vary depending on several factors like the product intended use or the assigned lead reviewer and also the FDA's panel which is involved for this particular product. And I've seen different types of responses in these situations, and I can share few scenarios. In one of the scenario where FDA will directly say that, or FDA agrees that the proposed predicate device is appropriate, and it definitely significantly boosts the confidence before filing a 510K for any of the manufacturer, because for a 510K, the predicate device is the ultimate thing. And in another scenario, FDA might ask for additional information to determine whether the proposed predicate device is appropriate or not. This typically means that comparison table wasn't detailed enough or the technological characteristics were not fully explained. And one more scenario which I recently saw is that they might also say that considering a suitable predicate device for the future marketing submissions. So these are a couple of scenarios that the medical device manufacturers can face during the pre-submission process.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for explaining it with an example to us. So, what are the
Yeah,
advantages? So, I'm just again reaffirming the fact that for any 510K submissions or any submission with FDA, it's important for us to understand the predicate devices,
yeah,
and a precept is really helpful on that side. And I also appreciate you sharing some of the limitations or when to avoid it if you're planning to do or bring in a medical device in a very faster pace. So in that case, this might little bit be a limitation, or it might just extend the
yeah,
timeline that you're bringing your device into the market. So let's get into our
yeah,
third one. So when we are talking about like a very strong pre-submission package, what are the essential
yeah,
components, or what details you need to add, and what's enough or what's adequate and what's not adequate? So what questions work well, and how many questions work well? So that these are a number of questions that as a regulatory professional who's actually doing the job needs to know about. But yeah, as I previously mentioned, so this is going to be more like a working session. I would love for you to share what you have with you, and let's see how it's going to look like in your pre-start. PDF?
Sure, definitely. In order to explain this, I would like to share my screen and show how the pre-star looks like so that the audience will get more idea on it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And would you also like to give like one line of what pre-star is for our audience?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So PreSTAR is an electronic template which is similar to eSTAR, which is definitely focused more for the pre-submission process. And this is how it looks like. And all this can be downloaded via FDA website. And the PreSTAR or the
Mm-hmm.
eSTAR can be opened only on the Adobe Acrobat. So this is how the PreSTAR looks like, where the manufacturer can select what type of requesting they're looking for, and it's going to be request for meeting and what type of the submission. It's a pre-submission meeting in our case, and since it's a new application, we have selected new application, and manufacturer will start filling out all the details like the administrative details about the manufacturer contact and the company's details, and if there are any previous
Mm-hmm.
pre-submission that has happened, so we can attach all those documents here so that FDA can refer those documents and provide us more valuable inputs. And they also have a section for adding standards. So if there are any standards that are applicable to our device, so we need to add those standards so that FDA can say that these are the standards that are applicable to us. Or if we have missed any of the standards, FDA can definitely recommend us referring this particular standard for the regulatory strategy. And then as part of the question, some of the essential components that the prefab should have is, and while asking the questions for FDA, so FDA has given 22 categories where we can select up to 4 categories from the chosen ones.
Okay.
And one
Four
of
out
the
of
other thing
22.
that, yeah, 4 out of 22. So we can select
Okay.
anything based on the product intended use. And the other thing
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
notice, suppose if a manufacturer is requesting meeting, so we need to provide some preferred timings so that FDA can choose some of them and they can come up with that they're available at this particular time so that we can have a meeting with FDA. And we need to provide an agenda for the meeting as well if we are sharing the slides during the meeting. I definitely recommend to keep it crisp, like 20 minutes to 25 minutes for the presentation for explaining about our product, and for the remaining timings around 35 to 40 minutes to discuss question and answers to get more clarity on the FTS feedback. And we also need to list the planned attendees for the pre-submission and their roles and responsibilities, followed by the manufacturer also has to provide the product description. Like they can also add the device description document, which I show in the next sections. And there are some few questions, generic questions, which can be relatable for all the products. And the
Mm-hmm.
manufacturer has to fill all those questions so that they get more clarity on that.
Okay.
And this is the description looks like. So manufacturer can attach the document of the device description. So I recommend to add it in the PDF document so that there won't be any editable version. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
advantages of using pre-star or the e-star is that we have a question over. So if you click on this,
Mm-hmm.
it will tell what are some of the things that has to be included in the particular document. So here it says that device description should include the intended use, intended users, environment of use, operating modes, and what are some of the specifications like inputs, outputs. So it will definitely give you some things like what things has to be included in a particular document.
Yeah, this is
And the
very
other
helpful.
section, yeah, and the other section is indications for use statement. So we have a separate section where the manufacturer can add their intended use or the indications for use statement here so that they can refer it.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to choose whether it's a
Mm-hmm.
prescription use or the over-the-counter use.
Okay.
And the next part is the classifications, where depending on the medical device intended use, and we can choose what type of specialty that we fall under, and we can select it. So, which will definitely helps in understanding the regulatory strategy for a product.
Okay.
And labeling is an option for pre-start thing. So not many manufacturers will apply for labeling during the pre-submission. It totally depends on what exactly the product is looking for. If it's a software as a medical device and if they want to market it and advertise it and then they definitely ask for labeling pre-submission.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an optional thing.
Okay.
And here is the pre-submission questions,
Mm-hmm.
where we have chosen four categories. Out of the 20
Mm-hmm.
categories, we can select any of the categories that we are interested in, and we
Mm-hmm.
can add the questions. And along with the questions, we can attach the documents related to the question so that FDA can relate it easily. For example, my question is to determine the regulatory pathway for the device and the proposed predicate device. I can add attachment
Mm-hmm.
of the AC table so that for easy
Mm-hmm.
understanding for the FDA. Yeah, and coming back to the question, so FDA definitely recommends the least burdensome approach, which means that the
Okay.
minimum amount of information which is required to address the regulatory questions for the medical device in order to reduce the delays. So when preparing a strong
Okay.
pre-submission, so the clarity and the structures are very critical for a manufacturer. So key manufacturers or the key components includes the device descriptions, indications for use statement, regulatory pathway,
Mm-hmm.
and the predicate
Mm-hmm.
comparisons and detailed testings like bench testings, software testings, biocompatibility, and sterilizations. And also a specific
Mm-hmm.
well-structured questions has to be framed for FDA pre-submission. And one important lesson that I've learned from my experience is that the quality of FDA feedback depends heavily on the detail that we provide during the pre-submission. So there have been
Okay.
some instances where FDA responds saying that they are unable to provide additional information, and this happens when the IFU statement or the device description, technological characteristics is not clearly explained to the FDA. So because of this, the best time to approach FDA is when the organization has a solid understanding of the product.
Okay. Yeah. Totally makes sense. So I have a follow-up question for you, Akash here. So you
Yeah.
said like you can do like four different topics out of the 22 topics, or is it like the four questions that you can ask? So how many questions do you suggest is like a strong one, and how much is too much?
Yeah, that's a very practical question. So as I shown in the screen, uh, so we can
Mm-hmm.
select up to four categories out of 22 categories, and we can select up to
Mm-hmm.
10 questions out of these four categories. But I'll definitely
Okay.
recommend to ask 5 to 7 questions in order to limit the number of questions,
Mm-hmm.
and we can add up to
Mm-hmm.
10 questions as I mentioned. So it totally depends on what type of
Mm-hmm.
product that we are looking for. And if it's a software as a medical device,
Mm-hmm.
I recommend to focus questions on categories like regulatory strategy, software documentation, and cybersecurity,
Mm-hmm.
and clinical validation requirements.
Okay.
And if it's a hardware device, I
Okay.
recommend to use regulatory strategy, bench performance testing, or
Mm-hmm.
biocompatibility or the
Mm-hmm.
sterilization if it's applicable, and the clinical requirements. So here the key is to ask the strategic questions rather than the generic ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really helpful. So you really explained on the number of questions, how much is like good enough, and
Yeah.
what's too much, and where you can actually focus. And it's excellent that you gave example of both hardware and software devices. That's going to be really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing this. So with that, we are actually wrapping up the third and fourth question as well, like together. And this activity or this exercise that we just did is going to be helpful for a lot of early to mid career professionals while they're actually doing a pre-sub for the first time, or if they wanted to correct a little bit. And thank you so much for
Yeah.
filling up the PDF prior to the session as well. So that's really helping us all out. So let's get into the fifth question, which is also the final question. So, on the feedback that you received from the FDA after your pre-submission or yeah, the question or the
Hmm.
submission, so how do you interpret it? How do you not interpret? Which is no misinterpretation or no over-interpretation. We
Yeah.
need to do it at the right or optimum level, right? So, what are your thoughts on that? And based on your experience, please share a few words on
Hmm.
that.
Sure. That's a good question for the manufacturer to know that. So once the FDA
Mhm.
provides the written feedback, and if the meeting is scheduled, so we typically have few
Mhm.
days to prepare the slides and share it with the FDA. So I strongly recommend
Mhm.
if all the companies to request both written feedback and a meeting minutes. because the
Mm-hmm.
feedback will provide the structure and the meeting will provide clarity. So here I
Mm-hmm.
usually manage the feedback internally once I receive the feedback is. So I will create an Excel tracker where in one column I will add all the questions and the FDA's response and the gaps or the actions that has to be identified for that particular questions. And I will assign the roles or the responsibilities, what has to be addressed, and also one more column
Mm-hmm.
with the questions or the concerns that can be discussed during the meeting for that particular questions. Because not all the questions
Mm-hmm.
required follow up with the FDA. There might be some uncertainties after reading the FDA's feedback, and it's very important to read the feedback multiple times because sometimes recommendations are very critical to understand. And the more you read, the more you get the understanding of the feedback. And one more
Mm-hmm.
thing to remember is the time management. So it's very critical during the pre-submission meeting. So since we have only 60 minutes for the discussion, so we need to use this time very effectively and focus on obtaining as much as clarity to strengthen and refine our regulatory strategy. Also, we need to remember that the company is expected to submit a draft meeting minutes as an amendment to this
Mm-hmm.
pre-submission within 15 days of the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great information. Thank you so much for sharing that, Akash. Especially the timeline of a meeting and how we manage it. Like every meeting is like that, right? So it just runs
Yeah.
the 60 minutes, and it's important for us to make the best use of the time that we have with the agency. So thank you so much for sharing all this. So we are wrapping up with the 5 questions, but I'm not leaving
Okay.
you out there. I have 3 additional things for our audience so that it's like easy peasy for them to pick up few things from this podcast. So the first thing
Uh,
is, what are the 2 best practices that you wanted to share out of your experience for anybody who is working on a precept right now?
some of the tip that I would like to share with the audience is that we need to finalize the intended use and the technological characteristics before submitting. And other
Mm-hmm.
thing is that the question has to be more formal rather than informal. For example, does the FDA agree with the proposed predicate device? Or does the FDA concur with the proposed acceptance criteria or the study design? So it has to be more formal rather than informal.
Okay, that's a great input for anybody who's working on
Yeah.
precept right now. So also on the other side, so are there any mistakes that you faced while you were doing in your experience, or were there any challenges? Would you like to share 1 or 2 with us?
One common mistake that I've seen submitting during a pre-sub is that there won't be any clarity on the device description document where FDA says that it's not understandable. So do a resubmission as a supplement to this new submission, which leads to a delay in the pre-submission process. And it also leads to the FDA's responses and the wasting time of it. I would like to
Mm-hmm.
repeat it in a different way. Uh, uh,
Totally, we get it. So it's important that your device description is on point so that you don't waste your
yeah,
time, the company's time, and also the agency's time. And we are able to expedite the process a little bit. And that's the whole intent of doing a pre-sub, right? Thank you so
true.
much for that. And I just have like one last thing. What do you think is like a myth on the pre-sub that the regulatory professionals have to know about in your experience?
One of the myth that all the companies think that it's a pre-sub is a waste of time, but I definitely think it's not a waste of time. It definitely helps in developing the regulatory strategy because after submitting a 510K and if FDA says that this is not the proper predicate device, so then whatever things that we have done till so far, it's definitely a waste of time. So I definitely recommend all the manufacturers and the regulatory professionals to submit the pre-sub at early point of time so that they can develop the regulatory strategy in a proper way and helps in getting the clearance as early as possible.
True, very true, on point. So yeah, precept is coming free of cost, so you should never leave anything that's coming free of cost.
Maybe.
And
True,
also, it's important because for any company, at the end of the day, it is bringing the product into the market and getting the ROI for all the investments we have made, and we
true.
obviously do not wish to have any delays in the submission, so which can be completely prevented with precept is what Akash has given us today in this podcast. Thank you so much, Akash, for answering all our quick questions, and the conclusion was also amazing.
Mm.
Thank you so much for screen sharing and all the prep work you have done along with this before the podcast. It's amazing for having you here. And with that, we are ending up our regulatory in practice podcast from RegStalk. So before I end, I also wanted to give you like a brief of our flagship program here at RegStalk, which is Regulatory Saturdays EU-MDR Simplified. So we have trained across like around 96 professionals across globe on the EU-MDR 2017-745 with a lot of practical activities, hands-on assignments, and quizzes, and a lot of deep down discussions like just how we had like now, right now. And if you would like to join our next batch is coming up in the March 14th. It's a 6-week program, 2 hours on your weekend for any busy professional. You can learn the EU MDR in full within 6 weeks. So if you would like to register, please feel free to visit our website and register today. With that, we are wrapping up, and thank you so much, Akash, for joining us today. And we will see you sometime later, maybe in a different topic, in a different podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Niveda, and I'm looking forward